John Lee Real Estate, find you the best rates. All throughout Philly like Schuylkill Expressway. Talking to people who out of the
Welcome. Even this is John Lee, your local real estate agent in the greater Philadelphia area. I'm here with Dan on, special guest. Dan is a YouTuber, makes a living doing YouTube. So without further ado, Dan, tell me a little bit about yourself and what you got going on, man.
Yeah. Hey, John. Thanks for having me, man. So my name's Dan On. I run a YouTube channel. It's called Honestly. It's like my last name, AHN, and the word honestly slammed together. I started off doing tech YouTube because I love tech and I wanted to find a way to pay for the tech. And so that was kind of how that started, right? Like, oh, if I could get something to, because I'm working my 9 to 5, that'll pay the bills. But then what if I could have something that would basically be able to pay for my hobbies? That's kind of why I started the YouTube thing. Since then, it's evolved and moved into different areas, but that's kind of why I started YouTube. Like, I wanted some way to be able to pay for all the phones that I wanted to buy. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's kind of cool because looking at your YouTube page, I find that you do mostly reviews, right?
Yeah, that's primarily what I do, which is kind of weird because when you say YouTuber, it kind of lumps it all into one category. Yeah. So I find people go like, "Oh, you do YouTube?" And I'm like, "Yeah," and they're like, "What do you do?" And I'm like, "Oh, well, I review home office products like chairs." They're like, "Oh, I think that everyone expects me to be like that Mr. Beast, I'm giving away 1 million, I'm like, no, man, I'm boring. I don't like drama. I don't like being necessarily in the spotlight like that. And so, but it's all kind of lumped together into one large bucket of YouTuber. So
yeah, that's awesome because I saw a couple of your reviews. The one review that you had that had like 1 million reviews, and then obviously you had a couple of others that were mostly like chairs, right?
Yeah,
it looks like you love chairs. You love to review like office chairs. So how did you get into office chairs?
Yeah, so long journey. I wasn't always a YouTuber. I worked 9 to 5 for a little bit. I actually started off as a pastor. I was
oh nice.
And then I left ministry on good terms, nothing bad. I left ministry and I started working a 9 to 5 job. And then I realized that I lost that aspect of creativity that sometimes comes with pastoral ministry, and also a sense of loss of I don't know exactly what you call it, but loss of like ownership. Like with ministry, you get a lot of, at a young age, whether for good or bad, right? You get a lot of freedom to kind of do things, try things. Right. And then you have bosses, but even the bosses are still like, we're all kind of entrepreneuring it together. We're all trying to like figure it out together. As soon as I went to a 9 to 5, I had like 4 bosses and I was like, what is happening? I wasn't used to that, especially because I went into the 9 to 5 world late. And so, I had bosses that were younger than me. And that definitely rubbed against my pride, that was definitely unique for me. But anyway, so I lost that aspect of creativity. And so I've always been passionate about tech. I love that. So I wanted to try it, I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But then from there, when the pandemic hit, actually, when I was down in Northern Virginia, I was buying and selling chairs. Nothing formal, but I did it kind of as a side hustle to be able to pay for actually my YouTube gear. And so I did that and I learned a lot about those chairs. I probably sold maybe about 100 of them. And so I decided to make a video during the pandemic saying like, hey, if everybody's working at home and you're looking for a comfortable chair, here's everything I've learned about used Aarons, the Herman Miller Aeron, which is a classic iconic chair. And that video it's the most viral video I've ever made. Within like 2 days, I had like 50,000 views, which has never happened to me. And when that happened, it was like blowing my mind. I was like, I can't believe this is happening. Yeah. And so from there, other chair manufacturers start to reach out and they were like, hey, do you want to test this out? And people from the audience were kind of like, hey, this guy reviews these things in a way that we love. Like he seems to really understand what consumers are looking for. And so I started moving that way. And so I do enjoy chairs a lot. Like I think I've learned a ton about them. I enjoy listening to people's feedback, like common, regular people, not industry talk, not marketing. And so, yeah, that's kind of what I've done. And it's enabled me to be able to make a living off of YouTube.
That's a beautiful thing. I mean, I think what a lot of people have misconception about as far as careers is exactly that. Like what I mean by that is like when you think of a millionaire, I think most people think of like a surgeon or someone who owns like a big brand or a company, right? But they don't think of people who do and have professions like a Mr. Beast, right? They think of like people who have high level of authority in the social space or even status, but you make a living literally reviewing chairs, right? And obviously, because of your background and obviously you doing ministry and just like your whole branding of just being honest, there had to been some kind of characteristic of you reviewing things that really, really resonated with, with these companies. So that's a beautiful thing. So the next question I really wanted to get to was kind of like your childhood. Like, tell us a little bit about how you grew up and kind of the phases of life that you walked through. And eventually, I know you mentioned your story of how you got into YouTube, but kind of walk us through that whole process.
Yeah. So I grew up in, my dad's a pastor. Mom is, we're typical first generation Korean. For those of you watching who don't know what that doesn't know what that means. I'm sorry, that grammar was terrible there, but it doesn't know. Basically, my
You sure
parents
you're not
immigrated
first
here
generation, bro?
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Can't speak English, can't speak Korean, My parents immigrated here. I was born here. And so I grew up in an, pastor's household family. That was an interesting experience. But grew up, definitely didn't want to go into ministry at all. Went to school, went to college. And I think the thing that kind of, and even, and then from there, the Lord had different ideas. I wanted to go to law school. I was a philosophy major. Took a bunch of education courses as well because I enjoyed that as well, and so wanted to go to law school. The Lord had different ideas. I was getting ready to take the exam and getting ready to do all that, and I think I had people in my life come to me and be like, "Hey, I don't think that's the right direction for you." I had a mentor at the time who was kind of like, "Yeah, I don't think that's the right way for you," and so on their blessing and on their kind of counsel, I went to seminary, and I think the thing that kind of captures that entire cycle of like that portion is just I don't know, just like maybe it's not I don't know exactly what you'd phrase it as, but it's kind of like a huge slacker. I was able to memorize things pretty quickly. I was able to make B's and C's, never strive for that A. That was never kind of in my lifeblood to do so, just kind of getting by at the bare minimum. And that also characterizes my time in seminary as well, to my shame, right? And I think when I went from seminary in Pennsylvania and I went down to Northern Virginia for my first like kind of formal ministry job, I was surrounded by people that were very different than how I grew up in a way that was so refreshing, in a way that kind of tapped into something that I think I didn't realize I had. But, a saying that my former mentor said was, you become the air you breathe. And so, who you surround yourself with is who you become like. And so I was surrounded by people who were really cared about excellence, not because they were trying to be jerks, not because they're perfectionists, but because they firmly believe like, hey, like our faith, right? Like we represent the king of the universe, right? The God of the universe. And if we represent him, then how can we come sloppy? Like how can we come foolish? How can we come half-hearted? How can we come unprepared, right? And so seeing that and living and breathing that, it was really awesome. And I got to see how ministry could be done, right? How we could think about things and not do things the way they've always been done, not for different sake, but because again, how do we be thoughtful, right? And so that was really awesome. And then from there, loved that church so much that I actually left ministry to become a regular person. We had our first kid at the time, and then my wife was really sad because she was the breadwinner. And, props to her. She was such an awesome, supportive wife. And she is, and I think I was really sad seeing her because I was staying at home with our son. And she was like, she really wanted to stay at home with him. And I think from that point on, I was like, I want everything in my life to be dedicated towards allowing her to stay at home with our children while they're young. And so that's kind of how I did my entire life, the 9 to 5. I was promoted very quickly. I moved over I was in government contracting, moved over to the business development side, and basically like kind of sales, where I was going after government contracts. I was leading a team that went after government contracts. And so not only is it high salary, but it's also bonus based. And so because of that, like very quickly, my wife was able to stay at home. And so, we're very blessed in that regard. But also at that job, when I was on the contracting side, it was like, yeah, I don't know. You see a lot of people who are kind of just going with the flow, and there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. I'm not judging anybody, condemning anybody. People should live the life that they're comfortable with. I really do think so. And then, but then being on this other side, seeing people really care about their jobs, seeing people in their like 50s, 60s go like, hey, I'll see you guys at 3 a.m. I'm going to take a quick cat nap because we need to get a contract in, right? It was kind of amazing seeing that, being around that. And so Yeah, so then taking that and then moving that into YouTube and having all that under my belt is kind of when I started YouTube and started really pursuing, you know, I think if I did YouTube before that, I would kind of take this like, nah, whatever, it'll get done whenever it gets done and whatever, who cares? Like, but I think having that experience or being able to experience that was a real blessing because I think I was able to apply that then to YouTube. So yeah, that kind of is my story. That was pretty long, but yeah.
No, that's a blessing because I know you have a very interesting story. You know, obviously coming from ministry, then you know, obviously, you know, going into bouncing around different jobs, and then obviously, you know, supporting your family. Now, since you are in YouTube, you know, it seems as if your big break was reviewing chairs, right?
Yeah.
So, tell us a little bit more about that story and like how are you now at the point where you can make a living out of it? Because I mean, in the beginning, it was probably one of those things where you're like, wow, you know, I caught a break, or however you want to say it. You got lucky, or you know, the universe obviously, you know, gave you something, you know, something good, right?
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So again, I started off doing tech and I was flipping chairs, believe it or not, to kind of fund that hobby. And I love tech and I still do. And I think it was really cool because when I first started doing YouTube, it was like, okay, you know, there are certain rules. I think they've changed recently, but it used to be you have to have 1,000 subscribers and then 4,000 watch hours within a 12-month period, right? So within any given 12 months, you know, sequentially, right? You have to have accrued 1,000 subscribers, 4,000 watch hours. That's a lot, right? I didn't think that that was the requirement. I thought anybody could just make money. But then when I heard those goals, I was like, holy moly. And so when I started doing YouTube, it was really discouraging. You know, like after 3 months, I had like 300 subscribers and like, honestly, not even 1,000 watch hours. And I was like, oh my God. But I kept with it. A couple of videos that I did, I guess the ideas that I had behind them were really good, got a lot more views. And then within about, I think 4 months, 5 months, I was monetized. And by monetized, it means that you know how there are ads that run in front of every video, you make money off those ads. It's pitifully small amount. Like please don't think like that's how you make money. Unless you're an entertainment-based channel, it's one of the worst ways to make money on YouTube.
Yeah.
But yeah, but it was really cool because it was mind-blowing for me. That was the first taste because, you know, all these years I had believed and I've come to believe that, you know, I have to work for somebody and have them give me money. But this was the first time that I think I tasted the reality that I could do something that I decided on my own with my own, like I could basically do everything and I can make money off of that. And I think that kind of reconfigured the gears in my head, right? For the first time in my life, I was like, wait a minute, I can make my own money. You know what I mean? Like, and so, and it was pitiful. It was like $10. It was like, it was nothing. That was like 2 months of work was like $10. But, you know, sure enough, I keep going, and it grows into $100. That's really awesome. And then I think after about like 8 months, it was like $1,000 a month. And $1,000 a month is not a lot. Like, it can't even pay for the newest iPhone. But, you know, again, for me, that was incredible. And then I started doing chairs, and then I started finding out, and this is all things that I learned later. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm really gassy. I learned later in the YouTube career, which is again why I realized it's really helpful to maybe have people who know how to do YouTube or to watch videos of YouTubers talk about their YouTube experience. But I realized and learned late about something called affiliate marketing. Affiliate marketing basically being that, hey, if I'm going to review these products and I like these products, that's it. Everybody has different morals, but for me personally, you know, my channel is honestly, if I like a product and I talk about it and I want to talk about it in a positive way because I like it, there's also a way that you can earn commission on those products as well. The most famous one is Amazon affiliates. You know, if anybody goes in, you always hear that line, links will be down below. You hear that phrase all the time. It's because if you click the link and purchase something, you make a small percentage of commission on it. I think the difference between being in the tech world and then being in the chair world is that in the tech world, the reason why, not that I was making so little money, but the reason why it would be much harder to make a living in that world was because, hey, there's so much competition. Like when we talk about TechTube, at this point, there must be over like 100 TechTubers out there, right? And so think about 100 people trying to fight for that last click. Like that's going to be near impossible. The chair thing, I think, was, you know, kind of like what they say, right? It's opportunity meets or preparedness meets luck, right? Like that's kind of what happened. I knew about chairs. The time was the pandemic time. Everybody's working from home, and putting all these things together, that video went viral. But I barely made any money off of it because, again, I didn't understand affiliate marketing at the time. But from there, I kind of learning about affiliate marketing, getting to partner with Herman Miller and things like that. That's kind of what started setting up the, the larger growth. And yeah, definitely a space that's not easy to get into. These things are heavy. These things are expensive. So I definitely invested a ton of my own money to get this started. And so if anybody, sorry, this is kind of like on what do you call it? Some advice for folks out there, like, hey, try to pick a field that's a lot about, that you can be an expert in, but that would be a little difficult for people to get into, right? Like that would be something to think about for doing YouTube. Don't just think about entertainment. Don't just think about, becoming the next Mr. Beast. Think about like what is something unique to you that that not a lot of people know about, right? Or could know about or could get into, that makes it tricky for other people to get into. That way you kind of protect your business a little bit.
Yeah, I highly recommend, because you also have an expertise in that field. And although a lot of people might not genuinely enjoy reviewing chairs, you so happen to do so, and it just so happened that you were able to monetize that because you genuinely enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And just for our listeners, like, it's very clear that you didn't wake up one day, making a living off of it. You did it because you genuinely wanted to help the community. You wanted to help people have a better understanding of, like, hey, by giving them advice, right?
Yeah. And just for folks out there, I'm also, I've always kind of done tech, but I'm trying to merge the two together. I'm moving into like the desk setup / home office setup space as well. So trying to move beyond, like, that's kind of what this is here, right? Like this little setback here is like, oh, how do I, create spaces, pockets for homes, not just a chair, right? So
right.
Yeah, that way I get the repeat viewers,
No, that's what's up. And obviously we'll have plugs for your links and descriptions below. Now for our listeners, how do we meet?
So can I tell the whole story?
Yeah, go for it, man.
Okay, like unfiltered, like, is that all right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the best way to do it.
All right. So our mutual friend Christine messaged me and she was like, hey, like John's doing this thing for, I think it was for high schoolers, right? Like Korean American high schoolers. And they're looking for panelists. And so, I think you might be an interesting choice because you do YouTube. And I looked it up and I was like, okay, like the keynote speaker is like this. She was like some, really impressive, really awesome lawyer. And I was thinking about it and I was like, well, I'll say yes. But what's funny is I'm probably every Korean mom's dad's worst nightmare, right? Like I'm sure every kid and their siblings want to do YouTube. And so when they say like, oh, YouTubers come in and they're going to speak to us, I'm sure they're all going to be like, what? Like, there's no way, because I think still a lot of first generation, 1.5 generation, I still think that, they're much more comfortable going that typical 9-to-5 route. Or the big prestigious careers of doctor, lawyer, finance, or whatever, et cetera, right? And so that's kind of how we met. And then while we were dialoguing, you let me know that they weren't interested this year. They didn't have room on the panel, which I totally understand. And so I think that's that's how we met, right? And so we were like, hey, let's set this podcast up. Let's chat.
No, that's
because I love your vision. Yeah, I love your vision for wanting to do look at outsiders, right? Not just the 9-to-5s, the lawyers, doctors, and I love that. I really do.
Yeah, I think it was a little discouraging, and again, the unfiltered version, right? Like, I think it was a little discouraging for me, only because of the fact that my vision for the event was entirely different than what it ended up happening, right? It was still a great event. There was a good amount of students that turned up. I think it was a bit over 30 students that turned up, but
nice.
A lot of the professions that were being represented on the panelists were very typical professions. Next year, I will probably have like full control over the event.
Nice.
I envision having different kinds of professions, and then obviously having a bigger event. The reason why I was kind of discouraged was because, I think going into like a cultural kind of conversation, I think a lot of Korean Americans face, and battle their parents because, first generation Koreans are really high on education, right? Making sure that we have high levels of education. And a lot of those jobs that require high levels of education are typically white collar jobs, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's an accountant, attorney, a dentist, a doctor. And Unfortunately, guess what the panelist was kind of represented by? As you can tell, doctors and dentists, which is nothing wrong with those things. But, the reason why I resonated with you so well was because I personally, for me, I didn't come I wasn't cut from that cloth.
Yeah.
In that same regard, Dan, I was not the greatest student. I think most people know that actually, because I preach it quite often.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
very proud to wear my colors. I, wasn't a great student. For people who live in the area, like I didn't even get into Temple University. Like
Hmm.
that's how difficult it was for me to get into school.
Yeah.
And I had all my peers and friends going into these schools, and I didn't. So it definitely, I just had to go into a different path myself. So that's why I felt like I resonated with you so well. And I was like, yo,
Yeah.
dude, let's do this podcast.
Yeah. 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 No, I love it. I love it. I
Yeah,
seriously love
let's
it.
do this podcast and share it with other people. So to me, that was my interpretation of it. But yeah, I mean, going back to YouTube though, like it's so interesting, like how you're able to obviously monetize it, make money from it. What are some suggestions? I know you briefly touched up on it, like obviously specialty, right? You want someone, whoever is interested or wanting to be in YouTube, to like specialize in something. But do you have any other advice for someone that wants to start in the business?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have a ton of advice. I've actually advised a few folks that did try their hand at YouTube, and so I think a few folks actually learned that hey, it's not easy. Like I think at this point, I share people with this. Like one of the huge benefits of doing YouTube, at least kind of my workflow now, is that before my 9 to 5, I would work up to like 80 plus hours a week. Now I can work maybe 30 hours a week, and I make more, right? And it's not about making money, but it's all about like time, right? I've got two little ones, and being able to kind of go home and be flexible with my job, go in kind of whenever, as long as I don't have something super strictly planned that day. Being able to spend time with my youngest, she's still at home right now. It's incredible, right? Like, and I think that's kind of the freedom it gave me. But don't let this fool you, because before I was working the 80 hours a week, and then so I would work from head into the office around 7:30, 8. I'd finish up somewhere between 7 and 8, go home, help put the kids down, and then from like 9 o'clock to 2, 3 in the morning, I do YouTube, right? And that was my schedule every single day. And
Mhm.
the YouTube part was just for fun, right? That was my creative outlet at the time. It wasn't an occupation. That was just something I wanted to do. I wanted to see, hey, can I build this up? Can it again pay for my hobbies? Can it pay for those iPhones that cost $1,000? And that was what it was for, right? It was just fun. But now, having done this for what, like 4 or 5 years now, my workflow has gotten to a point where like, hey, I can put out really high quality content. I don't put as many hours in because I'm still learning, but there are a lot less mistakes now than there used to be. So it's a lot of work, right? It is a lot of work. Please don't let these YouTubers that you see fool you. And so, okay, sorry, but the biggest piece of advice that I would have is that if you watch something on YouTube, one, there needs to be a little bit of arrogance, right? There needs to be this sense of kind of like, hey, you watch a channel, you watch something, or you see something, and you think to yourself, I could do that, right? But I think there needs to be this though. It's like, I think I could do it better. Not better as in like, oh, I could crush them, but like, I think I have that idea, and I think there are some things that they're not doing that I would like to do. Like there needs to start with that,
Right.
and do that, right? Like don't just try to imitate, because one of the biggest benefits of YouTube being such a public platform is that you get to stand on the shoulders of giants, right? You watch these YouTubers that have millions of subscribers, and instead of trying to do something completely new, I think you watch them, and again, you learn and you see, what are they not doing that I could do? That's how I started off in tech, and I think that's how I grew in tech, because I was able to do things that I saw a lot of the larger tech tubers not doing or neglecting, because they're trying to make a 7-minute review but not actually talking about the product. So for me, I was like, okay, I'm going to make an 11-minute review where I actually go into depth about things that I personally care about, and it turns out that many other people cared about it as well. So stand on the shoulders of giants, watch what people are doing, find the thing that you want to do, and ask yourself, how can you do it better? And
Mm.
then second is going to be like, hey, care about the quality of your video, right? Because I think people notice quality, not quality for quality's sake, not just to make things better, but because look, YouTube's been around. It's no longer it's no longer an infant, right? YouTube is now super mature. I don't know how old it is now. It's maybe like 10 plus years old or something. But because of that, you're competing with guys that have been doing this for years, where they now have cameras that are $70,000 a pop, right? Which is crazy. You don't need to do that, but you do need to come with a higher level of quality than people could on YouTube 10 years ago. Like the first video that you ever make on YouTube should look a lot better now than it did 10 years ago, that first video on YouTube, because there's so many things out there on how to do YouTube, how to make your videos look nicer, how to do these kinds of things, that I think to some degree it kind of fools people into going, oh wow, this person's really good, this person really seems to care, I'm going to go ahead and like and subscribe to this person. So for all those things, yeah, just those two things: stand on the shoulders of giants and really care about your quality and release a quality product, because there's kind of no excuse now, right? When YouTube was young, yeah, but now so much content, so much help videos exist on YouTube for YouTube that yeah, I think you've got to come a little bit further ahead in your first video than you do before. Yeah, I know it sounds like a lot of pressure, but yeah, if you guys want to talk, I think my contact information will be at the end. If you guys want to reach out, we can have a conversation as well.
For sure. And again,
Yeah.
you know, for our listeners, I will definitely put your information in the, you know, in below, in the description below. Now, I am learning a lot too myself, because as a real estate agent, we wear many hats, right? Especially with marketing. And one of the things that I was taught was that YouTube, it sticks forever. Like
Yeah.
once you put something as far as content goes, whether you have it from now, from 10 years from now, that content is in the, you know, in the universe forever. But what's getting more and more popular are these shorts, right?
Yeah.
So the short forms like Reels and TikTok video type of videos. How are you competing against that? And what are your thoughts on that? Is that something that you are going to eventually pivot to, or have you considered pivoting to?
Yeah, so this is a good question. This one gets asked a lot, and so this is a lot of insight that I've gotten from other folks, not just from myself. But essentially, there's a reason why. Okay, so I was watching this one interview, and it was about, or yeah, I was watching this one interview, and they were talking to TikTok creators. One of them had like 1 million followers. The other one had like 400,000, and they asked them like, how much do you make in a month? And I think the one with like 400,000 followers, they said like they make $1,000 in a month, right? That is an incredibly low ratio of followers to revenue earned, right? The 1 million TikTok follower person, even she wasn't able to make a full-time salary off of TikTok, right? And that kind of goes to that I think indicates something, that TikTok is great for entertainment. It's great for like quick snapshots and bite size of information, but it's terrible for like actually influencing. And what I mean by influencing is like, how can someone make a determination to purchase something? Like, I think for me, the shorts, and I think this is for a lot of people, those are the attention grabbers, those are the appetizers, and it should lead them into YouTube, because at the end of the day, someone's about to make a $1,700 investment on a chair that I'm talking about. You're going to make a decision on a 30-second video? No way, right? Like, and if you are, you must be a huge baller, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, I'm thinking of ways in which how I can leverage the shorts, the TikToks, the Instagram reels, for how can I whet someone's appetite to be like, hey, here's a product that you might really like, but I can't do it in 30 seconds. Check out the full review on my main channel, right? And I think we're seeing this everywhere, because on YouTube, if someone has 1 million subscribers, you can almost guarantee, yeah, I think you can guarantee that they're able to make a very, very comfortable living on YouTube. Me with 50,000 subscribers, this is where it's a little different. For product review channels, the ratios are a little different, right? Because again, my whole thing is not entertainment. Just to give a baseline, by the way, for revenue earned, is like, for my area, right, where reviews and tech and stuff like that, it's generally $3 for every 1,000 views. So that is a pitiful amount of money, right? But then you're talking about TikTokers with potentially millions of views making $1,000. That's absolutely, you know, the ratio is all way off there. Yeah. So anyways, all that being said, the shorts, I do plan to leverage them. It's difficult because from a time perspective, they actually take a lot of mental investment. And so, yeah, I do need to scale a little bit and hire some folks that are better at that than I am. And so, yeah, I would say generally think about it as YouTube is kind of where you can actually influence people, and even brands and YouTube recognize this. This is why Instagram and TikTok, they're trying to lean away from shorter content. If you've noticed, TikTok has raised their video length time to much longer videos, because they're realizing the short form content, they can't make any money, right? Advertisers don't want to advertise with them. It's not effective.
Right.
Yeah. Sorry. Hopefully that, yeah. Sorry.
No,
I know I kind of went all over the place there.
No, it makes 100% sense, because for me, when I'm using shorts or stories, like on my Instagram, because they're pretty synonymous.
Yeah.
I find that a lot of people do recognize who I am as a person. They're like, oh,
Yeah.
wait, I've seen your video on
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
or whatnot. And again, I'm not that I'm very popular or anything. I only have like what 1,000 followers,
It's
So
pretty good, man. That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
but for me, it's about local, right? Like
Yeah.
I feel like all of those things have done such a tremendous job and impact for the community in a way where at least they know who I am, and
Yeah.
it's done its job. Has anyone DM'd me and say, hey, I'm looking to buy or sell a house? No.
Yeah.
But how many times have I had someone come up to me and say, hey, that video was funny, or hey, that video was pretty entertaining, and
Yeah.
at least starts a conversation. I think that's what the short form does. It
Yeah.
has a good snapshot of just gaining interest. And then we have things like this, like where you have podcasts or you have, long forms, right? Like video long form. So I'm also trying to provide value in that way as well. Now,
Yeah.
granted, my podcast only has what 19 followers.
By the way, sorry, on Apple Podcasts, there's no follow button. I click the podcast and you can't follow
or
it.
subscribers. I think it's subscribers. Is it
Yeah.
follow subscriber? I think it's
I looked for the button. I couldn't find it. It just said listen now. I was like, where's the subscribe button? I tried, man. I'll do it again.
Yo,
I'll
bro,
look
if you
through it
could
again.
find a way, just
Yeah.
just find a way to click
I will.
subscribe. Because right now, I think I only have 19. Personally, I don't care. I just put it out there because again, it's content. I think it's something that has and holds value. And even at this very moment, I'm learning so much from you, Dan. So, personally for me, some of these questions I'm asking for myself selfishly.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
like,
100%.
hey, how can I learn?
Yeah, we can talk more offline too, man. Like
Yeah,
I'm
of
happy
course,
to
man.
share, seriously.
No, I love it.
It's funny about that. You talk about short form content. I think, for brand awareness, it's super duper important. I'm definitely late to the game. I definitely want to do more. It does take so much work. I think because like here's the confusion for me is that with YouTube, I'm always used to putting out like the highest quality content possible. Like for me, it's always got to be like the lighting's perfect. Like even the set here, this took me about 2 hours to get all set up, right?
Mhm.
And so for me, making a short, it's not like picking my phone up and then recording myself in a selfie. Like I don't have that bone in me yet. And maybe I need to learn how to do a little bit more like the, rise and grind, just kind of like, yo, check out this shit, but I'm used to like quality lights, lighting needs to be spot on and that kind of stuff. Maybe I need to kind of work outside of that niche or that like a temptation to do that. But on brand recognition, it's hilarious because you're saying that people recognize you. I had the exact opposite problem where people only recognize me after I tell them what I do. And they looked at my channel and they're like, I've seen one of your videos. And I'm like, oh, wow, I'm that non-memorable that you don't even know my face.
Yeah,
I've had
like
moments.
it's crazy, man.
Yeah.
Well, like don't get me wrong, I don't think a lot of people know me, but I think it does its job in a sense
Yeah.
that all the followers that are following me right now and on
Yeah.
Instagram, they at least know that I do some form of real estate,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
has
Yeah.
served its purpose.
Yeah.
So I think that's why social media is such a powerful tool in that way.
Yeah.
So dude, man, I'm so pumped and what you got going on. So yeah, like I mean, with all that being said, I mean, like what are kind of the what are kind of the or some of the stuff that you have planned for the future for yourself and as far as content goes?
Yeah. So, I just moved into a new studio in May. So this right here, this is like one of my side sets. This is where I plan to do, we call it like talking head, right? Where I plan to do a little bit more. I just wanted to look, sorry, I don't know what's going on. But this is kind of one of the sets. I've got another set over there. And most importantly, I'm able to store all of my chairs, which is ridiculous because they used to be in a trailer out in the rain. And I've reviewed probably like 50, 60 chairs at this point, but I've got like 30 in my personal collection of chairs I love the most. But this bigger studio lets me do a lot more things. I did one thing already, which was kind of like showing the weaknesses of a lot of the standing desks out there. I know it's not a very sexy topic, but standing desks, people just go out and purchase one. But it's like, hey, if you're relatively tall, these standing desks kind of suck for you. And so kind of giving them another option. But standing desks are not tiny things. And so to be able to shoot that, you need a pretty big set. I plan on doing a lot more desk setup kind of stuff, right? Like accessories for your desk and videos of that type, which I think are generally a little sexier, right? I think people can get behind that, but when you say chairs, they're like, oh, yeah. But yeah, even being able to have dedicated sets to be able to do that, it was really tricky with a limited amount of space, right? I started by working in my basement first, right? And then I took over the basement and a first floor in my house. And then after that, I moved out into a separate studio. And then now I'm in a larger studio. And so that evolution has been great. But most importantly, the reason I get these spaces is because I want to be able to do more content, different kinds of content. And so, yeah, nothing specific right now. I have a bunch of videos planned. One is going to be like a studio breakdown. So if you guys want to see what that's like, yeah, like and subscribe, you know?
Yeah, awesome. No, that's a great plug, man. Great plug there. Yeah, I mean, for our listeners, to kind of wrap this thing up, for our listeners, where can they find you? And what's the best way for them to contact you?
Yeah, so you guys can find me at youtube.com/honestly. Again, it's AHNESTLY. And if you go to my about page, you can go to my info and my email will be right there. So the email is entouragemedia@gmail.com. So you guys can find me there. Well, again, entourage is spelled with AHN. Basically, any word that can start with the word on, like my last name, it's gonna be replacing that, right? Like honestly, stay honest, entourage media, all that is on AHN, my last. That's right.
Our creator.
I really ran with that.
Yeah.
I really ran with that.
That's branding right there, man. That's branding. All right. Well, yeah, I mean, it was a pleasure. We'll definitely catch up, and it was a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much, John. I appreciate it, man.
All right, Dan.
Real estate, find you the best rate. All throughout Philly, like Schuylkill Expressway. Talking to people who out of the 215, even the 267, who always helping, like, oh, no time for no student.